Right now, we're in the town of Ein Kerem, and we're visiting the Church of the Visitation. This is what the Gospel of Luke calls the hill country of Judea. One of the reasons that we know that the Gospels are historically accurate is because they are geographically accurate. After all, Luke calls this land the hill country. We have no proof that Luke ever visited this area, so how did he know that it was hilly? According to Luke, his sources were eyewitnesses, and their description of the topography of this place turned out to be very accurate. These kinds of details give us the confidence that our four Gospels are reliable by every standard of measurement. Ein Kerem is about 8 kilometers west of the old city of Jerusalem, and it's famous because this is where John the Baptist was born. The biblical story goes like this. Elizabeth and Zacharias were parents of John the Baptist. According to the Gospel of Luke, Zacharias was a priest in the Jewish temple, and the angel Gabriel met him at the altar of incense in the temple sanctuary. Gabriel told him that he would be the father of John the Baptist. But because Zacharias didn't immediately believe the angel, he was struck dumb and could not speak until the time that John was born. Both Zacharias and Elizabeth were old and beyond their childbearing years. But just like it was when Anne and Joachim gave birth to Mary, so now God has allowed this aged couple to become parents themselves. Now, the Gospel of Luke is not the only place in history where we read about Zacharias. According to the Proto-Evangelium of James, Zacharias was the one who officiated at a ceremony where Joseph was chosen to be the husband of Mary. Now the angel Gabriel went to Mary in Nazareth and told her that she was going to be the mother of Jesus, who was the Christ. The angel also told her that her elderly cousin Elizabeth, who was in the hill country of Judea, was also carrying a miracle baby of her own. Upon hearing this, Mary immediately left her home in Nazareth and came to visit Elizabeth and Zacharias. Now, Mary and Elizabeth were probably very familiar with each other. If Mary had lived in the temple until she was 12 years old, then there would be many occasions, especially during the Jewish feasts, where she could visit Ein Kerem and her cousin Elizabeth and her priestly husband Zacharias. Remember also that according to the Proto-Evangelium, Zacharias officiated at Mary's betrothal ceremony. Now, according to the Merged Gospels, story number 6, it was here in Ein Kerem where Mary visited her cousin Elizabeth. Both were carrying children at the time, Mary, who had just become pregnant with Jesus, and Elizabeth, who was 6 months pregnant with John the Baptist. Mary's close relationship with Elizabeth and Zacharias explains why she was eager to come down to the hill country so quickly. Now, there are several churches in Ein Kerem. One of these is the Church of the Visitation, which is where we are now, and where it is said that Mary first visited Elizabeth after she became pregnant. And it was the place where Mary gave her famous poetic oration, the Magnificat. You can read the Magnificat in story number 6 of the Merged Gospels. Most people believe that this summer home is where Elizabeth hid herself in seclusion during the first 5 months of her pregnancy. And if you walk around the courtyard of this church, you will see the Magnificat of Mary inscribed on 47 mosaics, all of them in different languages. The church you are looking at was built in 1955, but it was built on top of an ancient church and monastery. In a recent trip to this church, we entered the crypt and we discovered a curious hole in a stone wall that had a grill over it. Upon removing the grill, we peered into this dark crevice only to discover that it was a tomb with the remains of some of the monks who had previously lived in the monastery. As with many monasteries in the world, the monks who lived here in the days of the early church would not bury their dead, but they would display the bones of their deceased residents in order to demonstrate the transience of this earthly life. Now, there is another interesting artifact in the crypt of this church. There is an ancient tunnel, and at the end of this tunnel, there is a well dating back to the 1st century. Now, this well indicates that someone must have lived nearby, lending support to the tradition that Elizabeth and Zacharias did in fact have a home near this location. But there's something else in this crypt, a large stone mounted in a niche in the wall, protected and obviously very respected and venerated by visiting pilgrims. To understand what this stone is and why it is so respected, we have to go back once again to the Proto-Evangelium of James, which was written about 100 years after Jesus lived on this earth.